Hello everyone. So this is a quick breakdown on how I made this material. Now this is not a complicated material, and this is not the best rock texture or brick texture out there, but I just want to bring out a few of these points and hopefully it might help you kind of like do this. So let me just start with this navigation right here. So let's start with this one. So basically what I did was have a few of these around. So I have this tile sampler, and if I just double click on this, this is the basic tile sample I used. I just set the X and Y amounts. This is 4x16, but I actually eventually used this one. So this is the variation I used. I call this smaller variation. So if I click on this tile sampler, what I did actually over here was to rotate some of these and change these settings. So I'll just go over here, and we can actually see that random, it's at 45 degrees, and I also use the transformation 2D to flip this so that I could just blend them and combine them together. And basically that's how we created this section. Right here I'm using the new feature in Substance Designer, which is called the dot node, and the dot node allows you to kind of like wirelessly send connection outputs, so you don't really need to see all these wires. To set up the dot node is super easy. I'll just create one example right now. So I have a dot node right here, and under the properties I could just give it a name. Let's call this test. So now that I have test, if I want to connect test to any output, let's say we want to test it to connect it to this, I'll click on this and I'll just click the drop down and I'll click on test. Now this is connected to our empty dot node called test. So that's how that works. So here, if I want to connect tile 2 back into this input right here, all I need to do is just change this. So I'll click on this and I'll just click on tile 2, and this is back to being connected to tile 2. So you could just drag your connection or just drag a rectangular selection over it, and you can actually see you're back to this selection. I'll just delete this dot node because I don't need it in this graph. So let's move on. So next over here, and you can actually see I'm jumping around the entire scene quickly. I just use this function called navigation pins. So if you drag a pin and you drop a pin over here, if you just press F2, Substance is going to cycle through all the pins you have in your graph. This makes it kind of like nice to move around. Another thing I like doing is to also use Shift Spacebar, so we can have a large view of the entire thing, and I could just use my mouse to move over the scene as well. So that helps. I'll do Shift Spacebar, and what I'll do is to float this window. So I'll undock, and I'll also undock this guy and undock this window as well. So basically I have free floating windows and I can choose to position them anywhere I want, and I'll just do a Shift Spacebar on this screen so we can actually see where we are. So right here I'm looking at the height details and the edge wear. So I'm getting my output from my tile sampler here, this blend. It's going out and it's going into this slope blur grayscale. Now what this is doing is to kind of like distort the edge of these bricks. You can actually see these brick edges. It's actually distorting them using a purling noise. So you can change things like the sample and the intensity, and then use a noise to kind of like change this slope right here. So you can set this using the scale just to drag this down. Now in order to speed things up, this is a speed hack. I'm going to change the resolution down to, let's try 512. So I'll just set my resolution to 512 because this is going to be extremely fast because it's not using a lot of memory. So I'm just using that because I'm showing this as an example. So basically I have distorted this edge, and remember our output is coming from our tile sampler blend, which is this one. And I'm now distorting the edges just to give it a very nice effect using a purling noise as the slope. You can always change the scale and the size, and it will automatically reflect on your output, so you can actually see what's happening down here. So next in order to get color information, what I'm actually doing is to get that same output. Remember, that's the output we're getting from this guy right here, our tile sampler blend output, which is a grayscale image, and we're using that to feed in that information into a flood fill. So this flood fill, we can extract other information like the gradient information. We can use to add variation to color, and also we can also extract the various flood fill to random grayscale. So let's look at what we're doing here. So we took our pattern, which we've actually distorted the edges, and we're combining that using a blend node to a flood fill to gradient, and we're now going to use that and feed that information into our output. So let me just go ahead and just drag this over here. So we have our curvature, our normal map, sorry, and we're actually feeding that output to our normal, to our ambient occlusion, and also to our height map to add extreme detail, to add basic detail to our output. So that's what we're doing right there. So, but again, we need to extract information on the edges, which is what we're doing right here, just to get that extra info from the edges, and I'm blending that and sending it to the base color. So let's see what's happening on the curvature. So I'm getting this curvature smooth information to get the edges around this object from the normal map. So which is why I actually dragged the normal map. The normal map is supposed to naturally be along with the outputs, but I just dragged this over here. So I can just take that input and feed it into our curvature smooth, use a levels node to kind of like bump up the contrast, and then I'll combine this blend right here. So I'm using a uniform color to get the overall color detail of the bricks, and then I'm combining that with the blend node. Now we can actually see this information right here that's coming from the bend using the color blend. And remember, I used the flood fill to random grayscale to get that gradient map information. If we go over the gradient editor, I just used an image to get these various colors from the image and just place them right here in our gradient editor using the sampler. So you can use pick gradient, and you can pick a color from anywhere and then use that with this tool, like so. So I just messed it up so we can have this funny color. I'll just set this back. So basically we're using the flood fill information, we're extracting flood fill to gradients to have random gradients, and we're combining that gradient here as a blend with a color, and then we're mixing that with our color right here, and then passing that color eventually into our base color output. For our normal map, we just get that same information right here from this blend, and we're sending it to our normal map. I'll just use my navigation pins real quick, and then we're sending that to our final output. So with that information, we can get the base color, the normal, the roughness. Now what I actually like to do is to use this separately, but we can just get that roughness information directly, but I'd like to change the roughness values. For instance, we just make this kind of like reflective, so we can have something like that looks shiny and metallic. That's not the behavior of a brick. That's not how bricks look like. So they're a bit rough, so it's not going to have more reflection. And we can also change that value for the metallic and also drag that midway as well. So basically that's how I broke down and set up this material. If you want me to send the link, just give me a comment and I'll be able to send this link to this material. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, just hit me up and I'll be sure to respond to you. Peace.